Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast with your host, Kareen Zutleger. Join us as we uncover the hidden thoughts, stories, and moments that help bring light to the healing power of truth and examine how silence can affect us mentally, physically, and spiritually. We'll also share profound stories, interviews, and transformative narratives to help release ourselves from the hidden and step into healing towards inner peace, joy, and fulfillment. Now, here's your healing strategist and host, Kareen.
Welcome to the Secret Keepers podcast. And today, my guest is Mary Breuer, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. Tell me about yourself. There's so many things I could say, but I want to just get into the guts of really who I am, which is I am a generous, loving creator that just happens to really enjoy being naked most of the time. I think clothes are a prison. Anyways, but that's really who I am in a nutshell. And then everything else just kind of falls into place with that. But if you want the street cred version, I am an owner of a boudoir studio located in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And I'm also a mother to three beautiful daughters. These are just my roles. And then I've been a practicing respiratory therapist for over 17 years. So I've been in the medical field both and in the art field for a combined 40 years, although I'm only 37. But between the two experiences, I live a double life between science and art. And what's beautiful is I'm going to be talking to you guys today. A little bit of how I blended those two worlds together. So, anyways, that's me in a nutshell. And I'm just really excited to talk to you guys today and tell you all my secrets because there's a really juicy one that you're going to need to probably map out on a piece of paper in order to figure out how this all went down.
So buckle up. So as if you've been following along with the Secret Keepers, you know that we bring everything from A to Z and everything in between. And so we love to talk about the stories that have gotten us this far in our life. And we also, the biggest portion of it is not to perseverate on the story. It is to talk about the healing journey that took place once that secret was able to come to light. And like the biggest piece is we know is what is brought to light can be healed, whether we're healing on a spiritual level, a mental level, a physical level, or an emotional level. Healing can begin when the secret comes out. And Mary is no stranger to the secret. And what is beautiful and what I love about Mary, I mean, first of all, if you guys could just see her, she is beautiful. She radiates so much beautiful energy. Um, and she, like she said, she used the word generous. She's an incredibly generous human and has this aura about her. So when she's described herself initially, I got chills that moved through my body because it was like, yes, those are very accurate words to describe her. So, Mary, like, so tell us, so we, as I said, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, you've had some secrets that you are definitely on the other side of in this healing journey. And so share with the audience kind of what did life look like, Mary pre-healing.
Oh, yes. So Mary pre-healing, there was always elements of who I am today before then. So I've always been this person. However, Mary before was a lot more anxious.
Mm,
I was a lot more preoccupied with my surroundings, and I would say probably hypervigilant. And a lot of that came from just being in an unstable environment growing up.
mm,
And so you learn these things as survival tactics, and they serve you well. They do serve me well today, and I've used, now channel them in different ways that don't burn me out, and actually to my advantage. And I'll definitely talk about that. But what Mary looked like beforehand was just very much so doing whatever she could to keep the peace,
mm,
to keep everybody else happy, to make sure everybody else was good, um, to, really kind of, I put a lot of people and mainly my previous relationship on a pedestal, where that was my main focus. So everybody but me was really the focus. And my belief at that time was that type of belief or that type of mindset was me doing that for other people was serving me, was somehow giving it back to me. And that was kind of how it was pitched to me,
Sure.
over and over, especially in the, when you say spiritual, especially with like my spiritual beliefs at that time and what I was, really surrounding the people I was surrounding myself with, which are not bad. It's just a different mindset of like servitude, of you are humble and you serve others to serve yourself type of belief system. And I think either I was misguided or just didn't understand, or maybe sometimes other people were misguided. But I was definitely, on this place of really being a chronic people pleaser. And what was happening was my health was continuously suffering because of it.
Boy.
Um, and so, I suffer with an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's, which is a thyroid thing. I had a lot of making sure that everybody else was good type of syndrome. So when you do that, your body eventually starts to shut down too and starts to
Right.
have issues. So I had a lot of different complications with my health that weren't extreme by any means, but they were definitely not fun to kind of go through, between having a heart condition that had to get fixed, having a gallbladder that had to be removed, um, all the way to, having a breast cancer scare. So there was a lot of things that kind of unfolded in my body that was giving me signs that I needed to knock this stuff off.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, isn't it? How our body reacts, and every single cell in our body has its own little energy centers. And when it's when our body is saying no, but we say yes verbally, right? We send such a mixed message to it because it's like, well, but you're telling me no, but you're saying yes and doing all of the things to make everybody else happy. And I think the message like that you're talking about is was so very common, right? For females and then in females in the mother role, that we're to, give it all to somebody else. And then what's left at the end of the day might be for us, maybe if there's something left. And I don't know about you, but I know I've found that when I give to myself, and it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be first, especially if you have little people, right? There's that harmony that gets created in life, and we have seasons where there's going to be a demand for, maybe an early morning feeding that, is going to take precedence over your self-care. However, we make sure that in the course of the day that we take care of us, and every yes that we give is in full body alignment and saying, this is something I really want to do, not because I feel I have to do it, right? It's like that have to, or I should, or um, if I don't do it, people aren't going to like me, or all the myriad of things that run through our head in literally a split second. And then we say yes, and then our body, it was like, hunched over, and it's like, I'm so tired and I haven't done anything for me. And then the resentment builds up because we're like, oh, I just want to take 5 minutes for myself and have that peace and quiet. And um, so your journey, right? So you have these health issues and you're like, huh, yeah, something's not right here. I need to do something different. How'd you
Yeah,
start?
so it did put me on a pathway of looking at more natural doctors talking about different things. I went a couple of different routes, a couple of different natural doctors to talk about these things. And in the midst of that, was also dealing with a lot of issues in my marriage at the time. Um, and all of these things were all kind of like playing, a role together. And it, and progressively getting not better, and not getting better. And then in 2019, I was working on a portrait project at the time called 40 over 40. And what that was a gallery and a campaign that I was going to start to be able to take 40 women who were over 40 and tell their stories and then throw a party and a gala for them. to do this. And so I was starting to build that because I was really leaning into the family and leaning into the mother and leaning into like generational stuff. And I was starting to open the door for that. And during my research for that, which I was going back into my ancestry DNA to be able to find a photo that my uncle's kind of like the genealogist of the family. So I was looking for a photo that he had uploaded there of my grandmother, her mom, and it was like a four generational photo that was old. I was like, I'm gonna put that in the magazine, and use that as a sales tool to be able to talk about this, right? So I had taken my ancestry DNA test, nothing remarkable because I didn't really have a relationship with my father, and I didn't really know anything about him. And I didn't really know anything about, my mom really didn't know anything about her heritage too much either. So it was just one of those fun things that I did a couple years prior, spit in that cup and sent it off. And nothing really came of it. None of my other family members had actually done it except for a cousin of mine, which that was pretty much it. So I go on there and, I get a notification as I'm looking that says I have a new match or a new family member, match or something like that. And I click on it and it says, you have a brother. And I say, oh, but this brother, the name, it was very familiar. And it wasn't my brother, that was my cousin.
Oh,
So I said, well, I know this guy. I grew up with this guy, and obviously, and I said, well, that's something's got to be wrong here. How would he, and it's showing up as a full brother, not even a half brother. And so then I'm like, okay, I mean, I've taken I've taken some science classes.
yeah.
Something that is not matching here.
Yeah.
What is going on? What is happening? Because, my other cousin who showed up as a cousin, right before that hadn't taken. So this was so apparently over the Christmas prior, more of my family members had taken this test as like a Christmas gift, and so I had no idea that they had taken it or whatever, um, and sent in the information. So this was all new to me. My aunt had taken it, my other cousin took it, my other bunch of people in my family had all started taking this test. One of them call my aunt, and because this is
Yeah.
her son, and I'm like, something isn't right here. So I called her and I said, hey, I did, I told her the whole story, and she goes, yeah, that is weird. She said, that's strange. And I said, there's not anything you guys aren't like telling me, right? Like,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
because before I call these people and make a damn fool of myself, right?
Mm,
Because I'm about to call ancestry.com and be like, what's happening?
yeah.
So she said, no, call them. I have no idea. That's crazy. Like how that all, And I said, so maybe there's something, me being the benefit of the doubt, not wanting to rock the boat, I'm like, well, let me call them. So I call them, I get on the phone with the Ancestry DNA, and they explained it to me. They said, well, this is either going to be great news or terrible news, one of the two, or just, I don't know how you'll feel about it. She said, but what happens is that you and this cousin of yours obviously have same parents. And I said, well, that's not possible. And I was like, because his mom and my mom are different, and his dad and my dad are different. And she said, no, no, one of your parents is the same. And I said, well, it's definitely not my mom, my aunt, because she would remember if she carried me in her womb,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Right.
So I said, what? But I said, and she said, right. So you
Huh.
get what I'm trying to say here? She's like, you and your cousin have the same father. And I was like, so what you're trying to tell me is that my mom had an affair with her sister's husband. And she said, ding, 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 ding. And I was like, oh, oh. And she
Mm.
said, yeah, it happens all the time.
Oh, wait, where'd you go? Where's your sound?
Can you still hear me?
Yep, now I can. Okay.
Okay.
Now.
So I said, well, that's just really interesting. And I said, and then I said, well, how is he showing up as a full brother? Because that was another part that was kind of like
Yeah.
throwing me off. And she said, well, because your moms are sisters, there's a lot more genetics that are shared. between the two because you guys have your maternal parents are kind of, sharing a lot more DNA than if like, somebody else. And she said, and it's not a half-half thing. It's like a lottery. You both just happen to pull a lot more from both of your mom or your dad and whatever. And that's so scientifically, yes, you're full siblings, but you're probably closer to three-fourths siblings than you are half. And I said, okay, well, I have to process this because at this point in time, I'm 32 years old. Um, and what was funny was in that moment, my entire life, like a scene from a movie, flashed before my eyes.
Mhm.
And it was like all of these things that never really added up, that never really made sense, that the sense of like something, like I always had that feeling when I was younger that I didn't belong, like the
Mm,
ugly duckling story. Like that always hit deep with me. Like I kept kind of feeling like gosh, like something is off, right? Like, but I
yeah.
couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't really understand it. And the story always went when I asked my mom about my dad and everything was that she was married to who I thought was my father at the time for a little while, divorced after she had my brother, and then when he was about 11 or 12, made her way back down to let him meet his dad because they split up and basically went no contact and they rekindled their romance, I guess, for one night. And that's where I came from,
Oh,
was always the story. Now, she also had court records to back it up. This man paid child support for me. I collected on his Social Security. So there was never really a question on if she was not telling the truth. Um, but that was also before paternity testing came out. 1988 was the first year that paternity testing came out. So the way that decided on who had paternity was blood typing. Me, and the guy who I thought was my dad, both had the same blood type.
mm,
So
okay.
done and done, washed it away. So that that really messed up a lot. It didn't mess up a lot, but it made sense. But also, it was like I had to redo my entire identity.
I can't even.
Um, the first bout of healing that came for me was I also met this man when I was about 5. Didn't really say much to me. I think he was a bit on the spectrum. And then my mom took me to see him again when I was 12, and he assaulted me. And so I had been living since the age of 12 until 32, thinking that my own flesh and blood, did that to me.
Okay.
So I'm
Yeah.
sure, that has a complex that
Sure.
happens, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
that's traumatic.
Mhm.
So at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like, thank God, like, wasn't my dad. Like, that was the relief that I felt instantaneously. But that relief was then, succumbed by now the legacy and the generational trauma that I was absorbing, which started to make sense for another thing, which was the that my aunt married her stepbrother, right? So this gets really complex. This is why I told you you need to have a pen and paper to write this down.
No, wait a minute
So,
now. Your aunt married her stepbrother. How did that happen?
so my grandmother was married. We're going to go back a couple generations. So my
Okay.
grandmother was married and she had 5 children with this man.
Okay.
And this man was not well. He was schizophrenic. He was in and out of mental institutions. He was very, sick and would try to hurt my grandmother and the kids, to take them all to heaven with him, kind of paranoid schizophrenic. So they were always on the run. She finally got a divorce granted because she was able to prove that they were in danger. Because back then you needed to prove things. So she
Mm,
was able to do that. And then she met a gentleman who was about 10 years younger than her and married him. And he had 2 children of his own that they were, 17, they were older, but they lived with his ex-wife's family. So they never really came around. my grandmother and her new husband had another baby together. So in total, my grandmother had 6 children. And this man that she married, unfortunately, was um, also a very sick man, very
Mm,
sick man. And he did heinous things to my aunts and my mom and my uncles. And
okay.
I'm just kind of leaving it at that because I don't want to
Yeah.
get into the details
Yeah.
of that because that's their
Yeah.
story to tell.
Yeah.
But not good things to little kids and to my aunt. Um, my aunt and my mom got the worst of it. And anyways, so then his son shows up out of the blue, and uh, I think that's when my aunt and my mom, because you have to kind of, and this is going to get kind of complex, but you have to think when you're 14, 15 years old, this guy is only about in his 30s, so he's not really an old guy. Their bodies are developing, and you hear this all the time with people where especially young teenagers, where there's an attraction, right? There's an attraction because your body is responding, that oxytocin is being released. And
Right.
so there is this kind of feeling of they know that it's wrong, but they still want to kind of thing that happens. And I
Okay.
and I'm speaking on this because, and I'm hoping somebody out there, I know that there's other people out there that have felt this way. So and that's how people get away with it, right? Because
Sure.
they don't want it to necessarily stop either. My mom did, uh, other people did not. And so, anyways, um, I think what ended up happening is that, well, now this younger person my age version of this man that I've been doing these things with is here. And so I think both my mom and my aunt kind of had that attraction to their stepbrother because of that.
Wow.
Um,
It's
that's
kind
just
of,
my theory. That's
yeah.
just my
Yeah.
theory. So
Sure.
I don't know. I'm sure there's some kind of psychologist that could probably back that up. Um, so I think both of them kind of looked at him as like an escape
Okay.
route, potentially, maybe. I don't know. But my aunt and him basically ran away together and got. So you can imagine that when I found out that this guy was also my father, that also meant that this guy was my grandfather.
I can't even.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so now I got rid of one relief to only absorb the
Mm,
heinous things that he did to my family, um, and this is like flesh and blood,
yeah.
right?
Right.
Um, so there's that just it really shook me to the core, to be completely honest. Um, and it also made a lot of sense for me because growing up, I was pretty hypersexual as a kid, and I never really knew why. And I think that there's something to be said about that genetically also. My
Yeah.
dad also was that way. Um, and
Okay.
he did not do good things either.
Okay.
So he did some awful things to like this kind of pattern kind of like kept on going. So I do think that there is a mental component to this, or addiction kind of thing, the same way that like the trigger is there for people who suffer with other addictions. Um, so I think that that was something that was kind of passed down to me, but I always felt so much shame about it. Like I was like, no,
Ah,
there was some shame about it, but there's also a part of me that felt like maybe I just didn't understand. But given the what my mom had been through, we didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about bodies. We didn't talk about men. We didn't talk about boys. We didn't talk about any of that. Um, she didn't give, and it wasn't because I don't think she didn't want to or she didn't care. It was just too painful for her to
sure.
be able to even, because she didn't have a good experience and she wasn't believed for a long time and she was gaslit and hurt and just, so many things. So I have so much compassion for my mom. I don't have any ill will towards her. I
Yeah,
think,
that's good.
what she went through was absolutely horrific. And so I have a lot of compassion for her and my aunt both because they did what they could with what they knew how to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so,
exactly it.
but
Mhm.
but that did, obviously have results onto me where I was very hypersexual, very promiscuous at a very young age, very interested. There was also my dad wasn't in the picture. Like there just wasn't any education or knowledge about it. All I was told was you just don't do it because you don't want to get pregnant and you don't want to get an STD, and that's it.
Wow.
That was it. That was my education. So I had to kind of do it for myself. And back then we didn't have YouTube,
Yeah. Yeah. I think if, like,
TikTok.
as I'm listening, like just hearing this, right? And there could be the propensity to make it mean something about you. And like who am I if all of these people are so goofed up, right? And have that
Mhm,
ability to take over your thought processes. And this is where you get to take it back and say, well, you know
mhm,
what? Like I see this and I see all of these human beings who were obviously operating at whatever level of awareness they were at in, with the information they had. And I'm going to do something different. And I know you
yeah.
did. You 100% did. And you have. And you
Yeah.
are like killing it. Right. And because it can be like we can really start to look in the mirror and go, well, geez, who am I? And look at all of this really um bizarre. I'm just going to use the word bizarre, right? Look at all these bizarre happenings. Well, you could easily look in the mirror and think, I am and have to be a bizarre human if all of these things, and yet you've been able to change your thought processes and break that cycle in your family and have a very different relationship, I know, with your daughters.
Hmm.
Like, talk a little bit about the healing component of it, Mary. What have you been doing?
Yeah.
What have you done to move yourself forward? And then I really want to talk about what you do, I know, as a labor of love, that is very cathartic for you as well.
Yes. So after I found all of that out, a switch flipped, and I was just like, I went into kind of into, can I swear? Screw it mode. Screw it mode.
Mhm.
Where I was just like, I'm done. I'm done. I am done with, all of it. And what I mean by that, it was that I was done with like trying to perform for anybody anymore. I was done. I was like, no, no, we're done with this. This is insane. This is crazy. I'm not doing that. Something has got to give. I'm I want to do what I want to do. And for a long time, I had been doing boudoir work, but it was very much so behind closed doors, very secretive. I was walking on eggshells around my ex because he was very, much so had a very different belief system and this, and again, all this shame around, sex and sensuality and our sexuality and all this stuff. And I was like, that's it. We're done with this. I am no longer going to be shameful about this. And in that moment, I decided that I was going to start advertising. I was going to start putting it out there. And I knew that I wasn't going to do any other type of photography. I knew that I was going to hone in on women and helping them with this because it was going to do something for me. And I didn't have words for it at the time, but I do now, which was, it was going to be healing something on my paternal side by giving women their power back.
Mhm.
It was going to kind of even the scale for my mother. It was going to give restitution to her. It was going to give restitution to my aunt by teaching women that this belongs to them.
Yeah.
And so there was a restoration there. And then in that same breath, also taking away the shame that probably my dad and my grandpa felt, because, had there been places that they could have gone to talk to, or if there could have been more normalization around these feelings that they had, or these urges that they had, if they would have had a safe place to go, that somebody would have been protected, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so taking away the shame of like arousal, like, and what does that mean?
Yeah.
And what does that do? And does that mean that, you know what I mean? So it's starting to bring that education there. So really healing that paternal side, but on the maternal side, also, like I said, giving that power back, to my mom and to my aunt and to the women in my family that and women worldwide that have been so much ostracized by this system and really giving them back what belongs to them. It's a restoration of
Right. And
peace.
because I got so many goosebumps while you were talking, right? Because I mean, women get labeled, right? And then, it's like you were talking about the urges and it really, it does everything. It starts with that thought, right? Because you have a feeling in your body, but then it's the thought that comes next. And what am I, what, what is the impulse that comes up? What is that next thought that we're going to do, this thing? And like you said, if they're taught, like I do pattern interrupts with clients, right? So it's like if, taught to interrupt that thought process because, this is not healthy because that goes to right building character and integrity in them. And if nobody teaches you these things, right, we go back into our very animalistic, very primal type
Hmm.
feelings of which
Hmm.
by nature we're animals, right? We really are. We are gifted with an intellect, thank goodness. And we need to have good role models around us in order to help build that intellect and those levels of awareness. So, I mean, there's so much in there for
Hmm.
you and to so I just want to take a second here and I think it's really important for you to celebrate you. I want to celebrate you because like this is not who you are and you know that and you've taken your business, your boudoir business and you definitely have scaled up and I think you have really given people an understanding of what boudoir is. And so
Hmm.
could you tell the audience, because there are many people who are probably thinking boudoir and they're thinking, like trash and they're thinking, porn and they're thinking, and it most certainly is not that. But I know you have a beautiful, because you use the definition really of what boudoir is. And I want you to tell the audience what that is.
Yes. So when I was looking and researching the word boudoir, which is a French term, it's the French word for bedroom. But when I was looking at digging into it a little bit more, I found this, I think it was on Wikipedia, but they were talking about a boudoir being a space. Thinking like Victorian type of house, right? So it's a space between a woman's bedroom and a bathroom where one can go to sulk. And when I imagine that, I just imagine, thinking back in that time, right, where women have to be performative, where they were property, where they were seen and not heard. Um, and it was this place of like this in-between space between, getting ready to perform and, all of that, but this space in between.
Mhm.
And so when I think of boudoir, it's a place that you just get to be yourself with nothing attached and whatever that means to you. So for some people, that can mean completely just free in their skin and they don't have because nobody's there. Like you're just in there in that place. And for some people, it could just mean, they're in a comfortable dress or a sheet or a towel. You know what I mean? Like it's just whatever feels comfortable and on your skin, but it's a place where you don't have to really perform, which means you get to be with yourself, which means you get to be connected to yourself. And it's this feeling of skinship and this feeling of just being in relationship with yourself because there's nobody else around and there's nothing else that you have to do. You're just able to be in that space. So I look at it almost as like a meditative state,
Mhm.
but a physical place. So that is the definition of boudoir to me, and what we generate in the studio, and we really let our clients lead us to wherever they want to go, and of course get consent and permission if they want us to help push them a little bit into sides of themselves in a safe place, where they can explore without feeling judgment and also feeling safe.
Yeah, and it just there's so many things in there because I love your definition of the boudoir. I love the fact that, I mean, what I feel like is happening now in the generations that we're in is that we no longer need to hide to sulk. I'm going to use sulk in air quotes, right? We no longer need to hide when something is making us sad or angry, or it just we don't agree with it, or we no longer have to give of ourselves what, and give of our body when our body is telling us no, right? And so you create this beautiful space of where everything gets to be a yes. It's a yes
Mhm.
on their terms. And that's so beautiful, Mary. And, I have done a photo shoot with you. My husband and I did a photo shoot with you. We had so much fun doing it. And, and the thing about it is it just was about the sensual and in intimacy moments that we were able to capture for ourselves. These weren't things that didn't need to be for anybody else. They were for us, and they were tender moments, and they're not sexual, because I think that's what, really needs to be a line of demarcation there, is that people get to understand it doesn't have to be that. If that's what you want, that's what you get to have. But it's more about the sensual portion of it and the intimate portion of it, and that if you are doing one by yourself, again, being intimate with yourself, right? Getting to see, what does my body look like, and like it naked, right? It doesn't have to look like anybody else's because it's yours. And
Mhm.
it should be, you should get to look at that and think, dang, I'm a beautiful woman, or I'm a handsome man, without it being comparing it to somebody else. And you have this ability. I have to tell the audience, you have to check out Mary's work, because Mary has a way of capturing the very best of you. That I know. I mean, we were at a live event, and Mary like popped me on a couch and took some of the best pictures of me that I've ever had in my life done of me. And it literally felt very natural, and just very comfortable. And you just have that way of doing that with people, is allowing them to put their guard down and let that flow out. And that is a gift. And same thing with your staff. I mean, you have amazing, amazing staff that we work with. And so I really encourage people to do that, to come and give Mary's work a try. Um, Through all of this, Mary, through what you do and through your healing journey, um, I know that photography has been a big part of it, but you have done personal work too.
Yes.
So kind of like,
So
what did that look like?
yeah, so that's kind of the next phase, right? I knew like I was like I'm done. That was the first step. What that was me communicating a boundary, and a boundary is not telling people other people what to do. It's telling people what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
And so, and that was it. I remember I went home and I told my husband at the time. He was not happy. There was a lot of resistance met. There was a lot of resistance when I started my business in the first place. And so there was just all this resistance that I had, but I pushed through it. And that's where I started was there. It then led to getting to the point where I started to invest in therapy, started to invest into coaching. And I think between the year of 2020 and today, I've probably invested between coaching, retreats, um, therapy, intensives, etc. I've invested more in my personal development than I have on my any of my degrees. So I literally feel like I have a doctorate.
Yes,
I think
I
I've spent
agree.
over, I think I've spent out of pocket close to $60,000.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
you
right
know,
there.
yeah, on there. So I invested a ton. I did a healing separation to try to restore my marriage and to try to get things back on track. And it was in that time that I gave birth to this idea of the Broken and Beloved Project, which is something that we're in our fourth year of doing now. But
Yeah.
I was literally mapping out how I was going to put women through not the process of divorce, but just through the process of getting that confidence and speaking their needs. And I would spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day head down in boundary work and learning this and being submerged in it. I just submerged it all the way down to like everything that was popping up on social media was all about boundaries, was all about, vocalizing, having the words, dealing with emotionally immature parents, all of that kind of stuff. The books, I think I read about 25 books, 30 books in a year. I mean, I was
Sure.
just absorbing this stuff like a sponge. And that's when I had decided to put this program together. I went through like a discipleship training that kind of outlined a little bit of like this community thing, plus a one-on-one, plus this whole kind of concept of bringing people through this type of journey. And that's what really inspired me to create something like that, but in my community. Because what I was finding was that every time I'd have a client in, and this is why I was so attracted to it, but again, I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know why, but there was something there that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But these women that were coming in, seemingly to just, I want to have fun and do this kind of thing for myself. And then they'd come in for a consultation, or I'd get them on the phone, and it would be waterworks of them just being like, I just really don't like who I am. I don't really
Yeah.
like my skin. I don't really like anything about me. And I'm hoping that you can help me. I'm hoping
Yeah.
that you can help me see it differently. And then they would come in and they'd have this experience. They'd see their photos and the waterworks would begin again. And they're just like, I never ever, it had one lady who was in her mid 60s and she said, I'm going to make this my obit picture. Like, this is my obituary picture because this is the best photo of me in my, closest probably to when I'll be kicking the bucket. And she said, and she's like, or maybe I'll just send everybody a postcard after with my full nude photo and just rock the boat for everybody. She's like, she said,
My
but
goodness.
seriously, and when she looked at me and she's like, are you sure you don't take care credit? She said, because what we just did in this last 3 hours would have taken me 6, 7 years to get done in therapy, talk therapy.
Yeah.
She said, you just blew through so much for me. My brain can't unsee it now. And that was something that stuck with me. So as I was going through this process, I read a book called It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin, and he talked about this epigenetics and how things are passed along and all that good stuff, but then also how you can rewire your brain because your brain it might not get any bigger, but it doesn't stop making connections if you don't stop teaching it. So there's neuroplasticity in your brain, so you can reshape it. You can redo ultimately your genetics if you really, really want to. And so that's when I realized what I was doing. And I was like, oh, this is like a guided visualization, but like in real time. Like people are experiencing this with every sensation of their body because they're here experiencing it. I'm showing them the back of the camera. So it is exponentially bringing people from one side of their brain to the next. And it, so what I will say is that it can be extraordinarily powerful. It changes people's lives. People
Yeah.
walk out and
Yeah.
they never see themselves the same way again because they can't lie to themselves. You can't, because sometimes you can look in the mirror and be like, I am beautiful. Well, your
Yeah.
brain's like, you don't really feel that way, so why are you lying to me? But then
Mm,
when you see a photo of yourself that I've taken from an artist's point of view, with my eyes, with the lighting that I want to put you in, with the way that I see you shaped, I literally feel like I'm a sculptor looking at you, looking at people's bodies, looking at people's faces. And this is where the hypervigilance comes into play. This is where that unsettledness that I've had my entire life, where I get to repurpose it now,
yep.
is that I can feel and witness every micro change in my client. I know instantly when they're uncomfortable. I know instantly when they're holding their breath. I know instantly when they're not really smiling and they're just faking it. And
Yeah.
so when I'm able to call that forward in them, they can't hide from me. They can't.
I am
And it's,
aware.
so this doesn't really work out well with me in relationships, but it does work out really well for me
And the camera.
when I'm with my clients because I can feel them. I will literally come to them and put my hands on their shoulders and I will say, down, down. And they're like,
Mm,
oh, I didn't even know I was holding like tension here. I'm like, yeah, your mouth is locked up. I know you're holding your breath. Stop sucking in. You're
yeah.
not, just
Yeah.
trust me. And then that's where I get to show them the back of the camera. And instantly they're a
Sure.
different person. They literally walk in, breaking out in hives around their neck. I had one lady, she didn't even own a full length mirror. She didn't want to look at herself. And
Yeah.
then she showed up in this dress that was like more fitted for her shape at the end of it. And she's like, I bought a full length mirror so I can look at myself. And I said, that's great, you know? So this is saving marriages, it's ending toxic ones, it's saving people from, you know, jobs that they don't want to be in. Because I always say this, like when you feel comfortable in your skin, when you feel just safe in your skin, that's your home. It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what role you're in because your skin is literally like the radio to your soul. And so if you don't take care of this radio and all you hear is static and all this other stuff, it's you're never going to be able to be in tune, you know, with planet Earth and your subconsciousness, right? This is our vehicle. This is it. And it doesn't matter what role we're in. So if I can take care of this for you, if I can, and I'm not doing it for you. Honestly, I'm just there showing you a different perspective. But
Yeah.
if I can show you that perspective and you can attune so things aren't staticky and things are coming in clear as day, the world is your oyster.
I
You
kind
can
of
do
see
what
it
you
as a
want.
variation of like EFT of like tapping, because tapping
Hmm.
brings you to both sides, or EMDR, right? In your, um, so obviously if you start talking brain science, that's my jam. And
Yeah.
but it's, knowing that we can, that the brain is neuroplastic instead of, years ago they thought that, well, once you get your thoughts, that's just kind of it, and this is just the way it is, and this is life. And yeah, and then thank goodness for the neuroscience in us being able to, we don't have to continue. The beautiful part is yes, epigenetics gets passed on if we don't break the cycle, right? Right. If
Yeah.
we, once we step in and we say, well, we're going to rewire, if I rewire this for me, that rewires it for all the generations. And so we get to do that. Whew, oh, this has been like power packed, Mary.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to bring this back around here. And the Broken and Beloved project, I know, that is again one of your labors of love. And I've witnessed it. I've been able to go to the the and the cumulation. I can't say the word right now. The ending of it, right? Where this is where the big reveal for the women, and it's so cool to witness. Um, but with everything that you've done and everything that you have launched, what would you say? What wisdom have you gleaned? What's your big golden nugget that you can leave this audience with today of all the stuff that I think you said you're 37, you're
Mhm.
37 years of life thus far. So you are, in my mind, very early in life here. So you have a lot of wisdom already for a woman your age. Um, what can you share with the audience that they could just take away and like apply to themselves?
Oh my gosh. I think the biggest golden nugget and I don't have any regrets by any means, but there was a lot of hesitation that I had around, you know, investing in myself, not just, you know, with educate like with just like my education because you know when you're talking about going to you know when I went to respiratory school everybody was super proud of me, right?
Mm,
They were just like, oh my God, and they were just like, woo, you
yeah,
oh.
yeah,
But when you tell people that I'm gonna drop, you know, $15,000 on a coach to help me get my business going, they're like, that is a dumb idea.
yeah. Hmm.
So the two things that I will say with that is, you know, you know deep down in your soul of soul, in the pits of you, you know you are the expert for your life. And so the
Yeah,
faster that you come to grips that you are the main character here and everybody else is just living it. And this is true for everybody. We're all the main characters and everybody else is the sub characters. Okay. So we
yeah.
all have this within us. So it's not one person gets to be the main character and nobody else does, right? But you really are the main character in this. And so what I will say is that the sooner that you absorb that main character energy, and know that you're not taking away from somebody else by you stepping into what you are called to do and what you
Hmm.
feel called to take on, um, the faster you will go, the more
Is it?
time you will have. So telling, and I think for myself, like there was just so much resistance, self-resistance that I had, and then outside resistance that I had. So being able to have that, and the way that I did it quicker was when I had support, other people who were doing it too. So get yourself surrounded with other people who are like scared out of their wits, just like you, but they're doing it anyways. But the sooner you have allies of other people. And the funny thing is, it's not going to be your family, most likely. It's not going to be your spouse. It's probably not going to be your best friend. Like you are going to have to make new friends in order to propel you forward because you need that alliance. So that
Yeah.
would be my biggest golden nugget is I double dog dare you to invest as much of, in your personal development, whatever that may look like for you, as you would in college. Like,
Yeah.
why not? This is literally your life, but like, and it has everything. Like, it will transform your relationships with your children or your children yet to be had if you plan on doing that and that's in your map for you. It will literally transform who you choose as a life partner. Like it will literally alter your life just as much as you getting a degree in respiratory therapy.
Yes. Oh, I agree. I'm full in full alignment with you with that. That it's been a conversation in this house, right? It's just a matter of changing the belief system around coaching versus, education. And it's all education. It is. And I believe as a society too, we're seeing the value in all of it now instead of only one way, one linear way of thinking. So if the audience wants to get a hold of you, Mary, and they want to connect with you, please tell them how they can find you.
So we are, I think we're pretty much on all social media platforms at this point, but on Instagram and on Facebook, we are Studio Nude Boudoir, or at Studio Nude Boudoir. You can also catch us on TikTok, which is just Studio Nude. And then you can obviously visit our website, which is www.studionudeboudoir.com, where you will see all of these things. That would probably be where I'd send you to first because that's going to get you linked to everywhere else that we are. But yeah, we're definitely there. We're on Pinterest. You can see examples of our work there. But our website is probably the hub of where I'd want to send you.
Oh, I just thought of something really super exciting. Tell the audience what you and you had a collaborator on this,
Oh,
but you guys created it in the like so that we can drop that in the we'll put that in the show notes too. So tell them what you've created
oh
and
yeah.
how.
Oh yeah. By the way, I'm an author, so there's that.
Yes.
Here, my business partner Jackie and I, she is the behind the scenes lady of Studio Nude Boudoir. So I'm the front facing, camera ready girl, marketer kind of thing, and she's my behind the scenes person that makes sure everything goes right, and is in line. So she's also an incredibly talented artist. And what we did is we took a handful, 31 clients of ours that we worked with in the last several years and digitized them into line art and made a coloring book. So if you want to get to know more, if you like all these juicy details and you want to get the tea, we paired that with my journal entries, starting from a young woman, when I talked about like, the hypersexuality, there's fun stories in there that I'm sure are relatable to somebody that, I'm the type of person that will say the things out loud that people think. And so that is something that will be really good for you. But they're short stories and journal entries where you get to have some reflective questions where I kind of get your brain thinking a little bit more about, how that was for you growing up and what you want to do about it. So it's a way to be able to bring boudoir more mainstream. These are all women that have these are real bodies and real people. They're not just made up out of anywhere. So these are real people that exist that you're coloring. And then these are my stories that are sprinkled along with each image with some reflective journal questions in there. So it's 120 plus pages of a coloring book slash art. It's an art therapy journal is literally what it is. And it tells more of our story in there, but it's called Coloring Confidence and it is available on Amazon.
I love it. Yes, and we'll have the link in the show notes. Okay. So thank you so much, Mary, for being here today and for bringing all your wisdom and all your stories. And I just adore you. And so I I'm so grateful that you were willing to come and share on the Secret Keepers.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, love. I appreciate your time.
Cool.
Thank you for joining the Secret Keepers podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please give us a like and follow so we can invite you back. And if you just want more, visit CorrineZuleger.com. Remember, you're not alone.